when I looked around, the one time I looked around, there was almost 40, I think there were 39 people in my house between EMS, fire departments, police. Hey guys, my name is Amanda, and I am a new widow. My husband passed away about 4 months ago. It's almost exactly 4 months ago. And I wanted to create this podcast called Widowhood because we really have nothing on this topic. People aren't talking about it. There's a lot on grief, but not a lot on actual what do I need to do? How do I need to plan? And what are some things that I need to know prior to my spouse dying? Even though you're in your 40s and 50s, even 30s, these are things that we feel like you need to know.
Right. And that's the biggest thing that I noticed. My name's Kendra, and my husband passed away 3.5 years ago. Very unexpected.
Mm-hmm.
It was right when COVID had first started.
Mm-hmm.
John had asthma, and he'd had asthma for about 10 years, and it was really not uncommon for us to have to go to the emergency room for breathing treatments. So in 2020, December, John and I both got sick. We thought we had a cold.
Mm-hmm.
And it ended up that on a Sunday morning, we gave him 2 breathing treatments at home, and he didn't respond to them, and we went straight to the ER. When we got to the ER, they did a chest x-ray and said that John had COVID pneumonia throughout his whole lung fields. So they admitted him. The bad thing was, because it was during COVID, I couldn't stay with him. I had to leave and only speak to a doctor twice a day. So basically they started treatment for COVID, and John was in the hospital for 40 days. Mm-hmm. So we did have the benefit that we could text each other every day, so we text all day long.
Mm-hmm.
But he couldn't speak without having a big coughing fit. So most of our communication for 40 days was through text.
Mm-hmm.
And that was an adjustment because we had never been apart, and we were married for 27 years. So basically, John didn't respond to the treatment, and they feel it's due to the fact that he had asthma.
Mm-hmm.
After 40 days, the 40th day, I thought that this would certainly be the day that he got well. Because to tell you a little bit about me, our faith is very important to us. John was a preacher. And in the Bible, 40 days is very significant. And so on the 40th day, I thought, this is the day that John's going to get better. And I started out my morning. What I had done for the whole 40 days was I would get up before my kids. My kids they were 11, 13, 16, and 23 at the time. I would get up before them, and I'd spend some time reading my Bible, praying, and just trying to prepare for the day. Again, at this time, everything was shut down. So we didn't go anywhere. We were at home all the time. I was in the shower, and the phone rang, and it was the ER. Or not the ER, it was the ICU doc.
Yes, I remember.
And she told me that they were in the process of coding John. And if you don't know what that means, if you're not in the medical field, it means that he'd stopped breathing and his heart had stopped. So when she told me that, it caught me by such surprise because I knew this was the day that he was going to get better. So in essence, they coded John 3 times, and then they told me that they couldn't do anything else for him and that I could come to the hospital to say goodbye to him.
And I remember that because you and I, at that time, were pretty close.
Yeah.
We've known each other for a few years. We met, our husbands meshed right away, so we became friends very quickly. I was very drawn to you both. I looked up to you guys, and we were with you in that journey.
Yes.
We couldn't see each other, but we did a few times. But I remember that journey, and I remember daily us texting, and your faith was very strong during that. So inevitably, what happened then?
At that point, I had to tell my kids. They knew that the ICU doc had called me, and that I told them when we got off the phone, Dad's not doing well. They're in the process of coding him. They're going to call me back. And so we were all kind of gathered in our living room, and of course everybody was upset. And then they called me back and said that they had coded him 3 times and couldn't keep him. So basically then I go to the part of telling my children. And that's the hardest thing that I've ever done.
Agree.
You know, again, an 11-year-old, a 13-year-old, a 16-year-old, and a 23-year-old.
That all need their dad.
Yeah. I will say the first thing that I did, we were all sitting together on the couch, and I said, we need to pray. And so I prayed, and I'll be honest with you, it felt hollow.
Yeah.
I was devastated. It wasn't what I thought was going to happen. It wasn't what I hoped for. But at that point, I had to go to work. I had to decide, what do I do next? So what happened with Mike?
So we have just moved into a new house, and we were, in the process of moving. I am very OCD and detail oriented, so I was always like, this is what we're doing today. So the time we had to be out of our other house, which was a rental, and closed on this house, we had about 3 weeks. So we were kind of in that process of moving. Within the first week or so, Mike was outside walking outside of our house, and the retaining wall that's around your trash can, he thought it was leaning. So as he walked over there, he realized it was falling. The bricks fell on his foot. Very minor injury. He did go to the ED, and he was treated. He did have some broken bones and some toes. So, of course, they referred him to an orthopedic. None of this, I even was home. He was like, we were texting back and forth. I'm at work. I'm like, okay.
Yeah, we were here together that day.
I'm like, he'll be fine. It is what it is. He'll be fine. He went to the doctor. They said, you got to go to an orthopedic. They put him in a boot. He did have like a big gash on the side from the bricks, so it was kind of gnarly. But came home in a boot. The doctor obviously said, rest, keep it elevated, all these things. Which, again, we're in the process of moving, so that was not realistic.
Right.
So we were still doing stuff. He was, going back and forth from old house to new house, going into our storage unit, all of that stuff. The next week, he went to see the orthopedic. They're like, let's schedule an MRI, probably, going to have some surgery on the toes. That was a Tuesday. On Thursday, he went back to the doctor for some, minor surgeries, what I would say, minor medical procedures. I didn't even take him. My uncle took him. He came home Thursday night, rested. The doctor, had called him in like antibiotics and all that stuff. And when, looking at his foot, I was like, that's infected. That looks bad. But, I called the doctor. They reassured, everything's fine. Saturday, normal day, we're moving. I'm moving. I'm like, hey, kids, I have to go to the grocery store. If we're going to spend the night in this house, we have like no food. I go to the grocery store. I come back. Mike is in the shower. And he was acting a little bit odd, like spaced out a little bit. And I was like, are you good? Like, did you take your pain meds? Did you take your antibiotic? Like, yeah. So he gets out, he puts his boot on, lays in bed, and I'm downstairs. And by this time it's like 9:30, 10 o'clock. And I'm cleaning up the kitchen because I had made food. And my oldest daughter says, Dad is snoring really loud. And as soon as I heard it, I knew it was that agonal breathing.
Right.
And I immediately said, call 911.
And to give you a little bit of background, both of us have been in the medical field for over 25 years.
Yes.
So that breathing is...
I knew exactly what it was.
Yeah.
It's end of life breathing.
Right.
It's your body expelling the air. So told my daughter to call 911. I ran upstairs. By the time I had gotten up there, and it's, one flight of steps, he was not breathing.
Right.
So as my daughter, my oldest is on the phone with 911. My youngest now, who is 7, she'll be 8 actually tomorrow, is crying. I can hear her coming up the steps. So I'm like, go downstairs. Everything is okay. So we're on the phone with 911, and they were like, fully dressed, just got out of the shower. Like, they're like, can you get him to the floor? My husband, he weighed about 220. He, was a muscular guy. And I'm like, I don't know. But and my oldest daughter, who is, tiny too, I was like, we picked him up, got him to the floor. When we got him to the floor, because his eyes were closed, his eyes opened slightly. And my daughter was like, I'll do breaths, you do CPR. So as I was doing CPR, I noticed, again, his pupils were already fixed and dilated. So being in the medical field, I already knew that this was not going to work. But again, my faith was strong as well. And we continued to do CPR for about, I think it was 11 minutes before they got there. We had a lot of police, a lot of fire, a lot of, rescue, first responders, which, did everything that they could. I'm sure they said they worked on him for about 50 minutes. They, gave him everything from epinephrine, Narcan, shocked him, all the things that you would do, because they were asking me what happened, and I really said, I really didn't know. Ultimately, I just didn't know. I was like, he was an hour ago was helping me hang a picture. So
you guys had a conversation.
Yes, when he was in the shower is when I think, so, what we thought was probably a blood clot, or, I didn't know if the pain meds hit him. I just didn't know, but they ended up ruling it just cardiac arrest. And again, I just was not prepared. And even when the coroner showed up, I was like, ultimately, he's the one who came down and said, I'm sorry, there's nothing we can do. And I just wasn't, there was no way. I was like, nope, that's not,
Right.
Mike is healthy, there's no way.
I think the easiest way to describe it is it's almost surreal. Like you see it happening, but you cannot put together that it's your family.
Yes.
It's such a shock. And then I look back on it now and I think I was in a fog.
Yes, that's
It's
the
like you're
best word, yes.
In the most dense fog you've ever been in, because you don't expect to be in your 40s and this happened.
And it's like things are going on so fast around me. They were, and I don't know about you, I'm sure. And I was like stuck in this in this moment of he's fine, because just an hour, you know what I mean? It was within a matter of 2 hours from where we were having conversation like this to where he was, that breathing. And like I said, I worked in the emergency department. I worked on the back of an ambulance. She's worked in hospital. We know. My daughter didn't, so we did the CPR because she kept saying, "Come on, mom, and it was hard. He's a big guy.
Yeah.
But ultimately, I knew, but I just couldn't wrap my head around that. I was like, "There's no way. There's no way." So, ultimately, that's what happened. It took a long time for me to come to terms with that. I had when I looked around the one time, I looked around, there was almost 40, I think there were 39 people in my house between EMS, fire departments, police, detectives, and ultimately they detained me because I didn't know. And when I heard him, when I went upstairs and I didn't hear him breathing, I slapped him in the face. So he did have a red mark on his face from me because I was like, hey, and even though we both are trained in this and I have coded people and I have worked on people, it's so different when it's like your person. And to give you a little backstory, Mike and I met 23 years ago. we've been married for 17. He literally on our first date said to me, I'm going to marry you. And I'm like, you're crazy. I literally just got out of a relationship like 2 months ago. I'm like, bro, no. And he asked me to marry him like every year. And finally, like, I was like, my family loved him. I was like, and he was literally everything I asked for in a man. I just,
Right.
it's hard to let someone love you when you don't feel like that's what you deserve, I guess, or whatever. So, but we had been together 23 years. Like, even now, some of the things I do, I can't wrap my head around doing it without him.
Right.
So,
And John and I were together for 28 years. I met him when I was 19.
yeah.
And a little similar story. I mean, he said, let's go out. And I said, we're not going out. I've got a boyfriend. And he said, I didn't ask your boyfriend out. I asked you out. And 2 years later, long story short, we got married.
Yeah.
So I'm 21 when I get married, and I spend 27 years with him, never apart. And the things that you do together, you work as a team. And we wanted a big family. And I never anticipated that I was going to have 4 children by myself,
Even now, when people say single mom, it's very hard for me to hear that. I'm
Right.
like, no, and then you have to think you are. So yeah, I had not heard that term until like a week ago. Someone said that.
Yeah. Yeah. So who was the first person after everyone cleared out from your house, Amanda? Who was the first person that you had to call?
Well, the first person I called was my mom, and I was so hysterical that I don't think she could understand me. But then she started crying. So right after that, I called one of my friends, and I think I called you third. But my other friend, she came over. Like, she's like, I'll be there in a minute, and walked me through it. She happens to be an attorney, so she was like, just sit here, do this. So because I didn't know. So ultimately, my mother was my first call, but I was so like hysterical. I don't think she could wrap her head around it.
Right.
So, it was really me and, my family. I don't have a lot of family here. I have aunt and uncle that live here. Other than that, my whole family is, in Ohio still.
Right.
What about you? Who was your first call?
I called my mom first as well. And we had moved here. Now it's been 5 years ago, but we had moved from North Carolina. We'd only been here for 6 months when this happened. So I didn't even know neighbors. There was nobody for me to even go to next door. I called my mother. She was about a mile down the street. She lived near us, and I told her, Mom, I need you to come stay with the kids. I have to go to the hospital. So she came, and the rest of my family was still in North Carolina. So the next calls that I made were, of course, John's family, and they're still in North Carolina as well. So, the first call that I made would have been my mom.
And then, for me, when I called my mom, I didn't even know what the first step was. Like, Mike's still upstairs laying on the ground where and they're, the coroner, everybody starts to clear out except for the coroner and my one friend who was like, the coroner, came, you want to go say goodbye, whatever. So we did. And even seeing him laying there, like in his, his Nike shorts and his Nike t-shirt. I think he actually had one of his shirts that he cuts off terribly. I hated that. He literally had on full clothes, hair, gel in his hair. So it was just still not real.
Right.
So once everybody cleared out, my mom was like, do you want me to come there? And I'm like, yeah, because I didn't even know what to do. My oldest daughter is an adult, so she helped me make phone calls. So we made phone calls. I know that morning I had called you, and you were like, I'm coming over, and I was just like, okay. And so I do have some really good friends, but we've lived here almost 11 years now. It'll be 11 years, I think, November. So we have made some great friends, but I didn't really have family here either.
Right.
So my mom was my first call. After that, it was texting and calling other people. I had to call Mike's, his family, his sisters. He has 2 sisters. reach out to he has an adult son in Ohio. And so those were really difficult phone calls. And I'm going to be honest, I was in such a fog, I could not tell you what I said to any of those people.
I think it's, in retrospect, if you have somebody that can make phone calls for you,
yes,
that would be the biggest gift, because you can't believe what's happened and you're having to repeat it over and over again. And so I know when I went to the hospital, my mom did start making some phone calls for me.
Mine did too, yeah.
But that's something that I remember riding to the hospital. I drove myself. Nobody needs to be driving when they've just gotten this news.
No, 100%.
It was pouring rain. John drove everywhere. I never drove. I never drove us anywhere, and I definitely didn't like driving in the rain. So I got to the hospital, and keep in mind, I hadn't been able to see him for 40 days. And I kept thinking in my mind, why do I get to see him now? You know, it's if COVID,
still COVID.
If it's COVID, why is it okay for me to see him now? And so at any rate, I get to the entrance of the hospital, and there's a nurse waiting for me. And she takes me back to the ICU. I have to suit up and still mask and gown. And she said, you can go into his room. And she said, you can stay as long as you need. And I went in, and they had been very good to me. They had a chair there for me. They had something to drink for me. She said, we're not going to bother you. Take as long as you want. And he looked exactly the same. I was like, what are you doing? You know, of course, whenever you're in the ICU and you're on the ventilator, you're attached to everything. And they had taken all of his ET tube and his leads off. So he just looked normal.
Peaceful. Sleeping.
And I looked at him, you know, and you just, it's almost like you're looking at somebody else. The nurse did come in, and she said, I want to tell you the coolest thing about him. Because 10 days before he passed, they had to intubate him because he couldn't breathe on his own anymore. And she said they told him, you know, we have to intubate you. You know, you can't keep doing this. And he had talked very little, and she said that he prayed before they intubated him. She said, I wish you could have seen the people in the room when that happened. She said everybody just stopped everything they were doing. She said, and then he was like, okay. And so to hear a story like that, it made me really proud of him. But I stayed with him for a few minutes. I don't think I even sat down. And she just came to check on me. I said, I'm ready. And she was like, you don't want to stay longer? I said, no, he's not here. He's not here. And so I walked back out to the nurse's station, and they hand me a sheet of paper that's got all of the funeral homes that are close by. And she said, which one do you want to use? And I was like, I don't know. I just moved here 6 months ago. There's just so many decisions that people want you to make.
So quickly.
And so I chose the first one on the list.
Exactly. Did you guys have, and again, this is what we're talking about, guys, so we're going to get into it. Did you guys have like a death plan? Did you know his wishes? Did you have a will? Did you have, I mean, those are things that are so important that we hadn't done yet. Because we were young. You know, and we're not that young. I don't know why we didn't, but did you guys have that in place?
Well, from the time that we got married, John and I had both agreed that we wanted to be cremated. We had always discussed that. So I knew that. But 2 years before he got sick, we did actually go to a lawyer's office, and we had our wills made. Mainly in my mind, I was thinking we need to have a will in case something happens to both of us at the same time, because we set up that our adult daughter would be our younger children's guardians. That's what we were doing it for. That was the purpose of us having a will together. So we did have a will. John did have life insurance. But that's the only way that I knew when I got to the funeral home the answer to these things. Like I knew what he wanted. So I didn't feel like I had to make that kind of decision right then because I knew we had always talked about him being cremated.
Yeah.
So, and you said you guys had never
Well, we
talked about that?
We had always just, we didn't have it in writing, but I would say when we moved here, probably we, had talked about, I've had some major surgeries. He's had some too. We both have had, so we always knew, like, we didn't want to be put on life support. Like we
Right.
had this discussion, and that we wanted to be cremated. Both of us said that, so that I knew. But as far as anything else, no. We had an appointment to meet with someone about life insurance and financial planning and that stuff, but we hadn't pulled the trigger yet on that. We hadn't done it. So I only knew he wanted to be cremated. And it like within an hour of the one of the firemen, it was a gentleman that I did know from the gym. So he, stayed kind of for a minute and put his arm around me. But yeah, the coroner comes up and hands you a paper and says, "Where do you want us to put him?" And I remember that so clearly because I was like, I don't know. Like, I didn't even know what to say. I literally said, and I laugh about it now, but I'm like, you want to put him in the garage? Like, I don't know what you're asking me.
Right.
And they were like, you need to pick a funeral home. And they give you that sheet of paper. And again, now by this point, it's like 2 a.m. So no one's answering. So the first person that answered, I think, was like at 6 a.m. I'm, had him sent there. And it was from that point, once he got there, which again, this is he, technically, we called 911 Saturday night. They pronounced him Sunday morning. This is Sunday morning. Like, I'm like, I don't need, like Sunday. So they did take the body, and then they told me that I would have to come identify it on Monday because he was being cremated, or I don't really know why. So Monday, I had to call the funeral home. They were not calling me. Like, no one was giving me any answers, and I knew nothing. Like, I had some family in town, but they didn't know the answers either. So I needed someone to be like, take my hand and walk me through, what do I do with the body? Like, what kind of service do I have? Where do I go? Like, everything. Because I knew only that he wanted to be cremated. I knew where his faith was at, so I knew, where he was. But I didn't have anything else planned. We just didn't. And it's, looking back, it's stupid because now I do have all of that stuff. Now I do have, but it forced me to do that. Otherwise, I probably would have done what we were doing, which is what most people, I think, do. You put it off until you get to this house or this place
Right.
or this job, or once I buy this, then that's the biggest misconception about life is I got time.
Right.
Because we don't. It goes like that. So
I know I felt, as soon as this happened, I felt like I have to make really concrete arrangements because what if something happens to me?
yes, felt the same.
So that is one of the first things that I did. I met with my lawyer to draw up a new will because John was.
And how far? I mean, like, I did that within 2 weeks. Did all that.
It was
Yeah.
probably the first week because my husband had businesses in North Carolina. He had rental property and he sold cars in North Carolina. And that was one thing that I realized I'm going to have to keep on with this business. And people were calling me and texting me and saying, I know this is a bad time, but I'm buying this car from John. Or I'm doing this project on this rental home. What do you want me to do next? And that was really hard for me because John and I didn't, I was a nurse. I knew John had rental property,
Yeah.
but I didn't know like the stage of what everything was in. So then, like you're having to make all these arrangements and trying to fill in the blanks of what exactly stage was this and what is this what John wants me to do.
Right.
But I think the first thing that was hard for me was having to go to the funeral home the next day.
That was tough for me.
And luckily, my sister had come from North Carolina, and she went with me, and she drove me there. But it's, you're 48 and
know. I
sitting
am
there.
too.
And I was actually in a little different spot because there were no services or funerals
I was
at the
gonna
time.
ask, did you guys have any kind of?
No, we had planned to do a service when, social isolation was
Yeah.
finished. I figured it would be 6 to 8 months from when he passed, and so I didn't have to make a lot of those kind of decisions right at the beginning. And for us, and Amanda and I are just giving you our journey. It's not what you should do. It's not what we absolutely suggest. I'm just telling you what happened for me was when that 8 months had passed, my children and I didn't want to do a service.
You don't want to relive that moment.
We didn't.
Yeah.
We had already, we had, months where we were still in the home together. And in a way, it was a blessing because we spent so much time together. But my children and I decided we didn't want to have a formal service, after the time passed.
Because it had been, yeah. So we, again, those are decisions you have to make very quickly. We went to the funeral home. I can't remember if it was Monday or Tuesday, to be honest with you. My family went with me. I did not drive. Thank God my sister-in-law and brother were there, and they drove. And they, like, sit you in this room, and they're like, here's all the paperwork you have to sign. Like, if here's all the urns and boxes that you can put him in. And I will say this now, too. I don't even remember what I picked out. Like, I have it now, obviously, at my house, but I don't remember picking that. I have, like, my brother helped kind of just, like, said, yeah, that's, like, let's do this. And luckily, and then they said, you need to identify. So my oldest daughter, said, I'll do it. And I just thought, God, I don't want to put that burden on her.
Right.
But I didn't know if I could do it. Like, I was like, like I said, I was still in the fog. So she goes in, and she comes out crying, and she goes, Mom, he looks really peaceful.
Right.
So I went in and looked at him, and he did.
Yeah.
He did. So that was a good feeling, because I know, like, that 2 weeks with that injury, him getting an infection and the foot, he was in pain.
He was in a lot of pain.
He was in a lot of pain, and he was complaining. And if you know my husband, he's still going to keep pushing through, because that's how I am. I'm like, we got shit to do, bro. Let's get it done. But anyone that knows my husband knows, like, he was just such a giving, kind person. We both always make a joke that we look scary and intimidating, but we're huge teddy bears. The day before he died, one of the contractors, because it was raining, got stuck one of his vans. Mike was out there with his boot and his crutch helping dig this guy out of the rain. And I'm like, what are you doing? That was Saturday, right before. So
I know when John was in the hospital for those 40 days, and I had his phone after he passed, I looked, and Mike had texted him every day.
Every day, every single day.
It was a Bible verse, or you're going to say strong, brother.
Yep. And that is who Mike was.
Yeah.
And luckily I had some really good friends. My friends Sarah and Roberto, they were, like, at the house the next day. You were there, and I will say this, like, I probably was not gracious and kind or whatever during that time, but you and them, when, like, they kind of said, let's do a service here, do you like this? And I just basically signed and sent money, and that's what I feel like. I printed out some pictures, but they pretty much took the reins of it. And then, like, when you came over, I just remember this so clearly that I think it was Sunday. That was the Sunday. You didn't say, what do you need? Which is what everybody says, by the way. What do you need? I'm here for you. Because I didn't know.
You don't know.
You don't know. But if the dryer went off, she's folded clothes. If Hudson came down and she played a game with her. If somebody ate something, she put a, you just were there. And really those next few days, you need someone that's like your ride or die. Like, what do you, like, I'm just a body. Whatever you need. If you need me to make phone calls, if you need me to fold your clothes, if you need me to wash your hair in the shower because you physically can't function, I'm there. Right. And you were somebody, they were another one. They were coming over every day, bringing us food, making sure everybody ate. That's really what I just needed.
Right. I didn't even think, have the kids eaten?
Yeah.
Because you don't want to eat.
No, and we didn't.
It's a furthest thing from my mind, but I was thankful that my mom and my sister were there to make sure people were eating at normal times.
Correct.
And just bringing you something to drink, and it's like time stops almost.
Yeah.
And like you said, my mom washed the dishes if people were eating. She, called people, answered the door because people would come over.
That was another thing. Yeah, people coming over a lot.
Just answering the door. And when somebody says, what do you need? You really don't know what you need. I know a lot of people from my kids' school asked, do you guys need meals, or are you financially okay? Which is wonderful because people want to help you. But I think for me, one thing that was really helpful was people would just send gift cards to go eat someplace, or like a DoorDash card.
We got lots
and then
of those
we
too.
didn't have all this food in the house that had to be thrown away, or
Did you feel guilty about that too? Then you're like, I feel bad. These people are making me meals, and I'm just throwing. I felt terrible, but I don't think we ate. Hudson ate, but I mean, I did not eat. I don't think for the first week. I didn't eat. People were saying you have to eat.
Have to eat.
And yeah, I just.
How about for you? Were you able to sleep?
No. I didn't sleep. Well, Mike died in our bedroom.
Right.
So every time I walked up there, what I saw in my head was not, my bed that I love in this new house that we love. I saw my husband on the floor, dead. So I didn't. And when I would sleep, I would wake up and just be soaked with sweat because I was like a panic attack, because I was like, there's no way this is real. There's just no way. And then I have to remind myself, shit, he's not here.
Right.
And on top of that, it was the huge list of things that in my head that I had to get done.
That you have to get done.
Because you have to get them done. There's no one else. I didn't have anyone else. So that caused me not to sleep. So I didn't sleep in my bedroom for the first, I would say, week and a half. Another one of my really great friends said, do you need a new bed comforter? And I was like, and so she just brought me one. And that helped because now the bed looked different. But there were a lot of things that I didn't know I needed, that the DoorDash gift cards. And people did, donate financially because financially, Mike was our primary breadwinner. And so we depended on his income. And I had recently, gone back to school, opened the med spa, further, done some further other education. So I knew for the next year I wasn't going to get a paycheck, and we were fine with it. So that was another moment. That was kind of like my oh shit moment. What am I going to do? Because, Mike made, the majority of our income. So, his work paid him through the whole month. They have been so helpful. They donated. They have just been wonderful. Everyone at his work, AHT Cooling Systems, the best people. Amanda has been great. Jurgen. But that was really, for me, it was a week after when people, you're having to, cut some checks for some big amounts, and pay for some things, not literally checks of, Venmo and, But I was like looking at what we had in our bank account and going, what am I going to do?
Right.
We have this new house. Like for me, and I felt even guilty, like being like, oh shit, how are we going to make money? Like I'm like, you got to, I know, like I got to figure it out. So that's when I went into my typical like OCD list making, where I had like notebooks with lists of things, and I, would sleep like 2 hours and get up and just so overwhelmed, and would have.
Right.
I mean, like I remember being in my living room having like a full. I would tell you, I don't even know what a panic attack felt like, but I felt like I was going to die. My heart was beating. I was like, I couldn't catch my breath. I had that moment, and I just was like, everybody's got to get out of my house. I need a minute.
And that's hard, too, if you're more of an introverted or independent person.
Yeah.
For me, I didn't want a lot of people in my home.
Neither did I.
And it made me uncomfortable. I know we've joked before, we're not huggers.
Yeah.
We're not huggers.
Don't hug me. And so many people
coming in and wanting to hug you.
Yeah.
And I'm very private. I'm a very private person. So
Yes.
it was uncomfortable for me. And I understand it, but I think I had so much relief because after about a week, it's more phone calls than people visiting. And I was so relieved that there was not a whole bunch of people in my home.
Yes.
And going back to what you said about like our finances, I was a night shift nurse, and
Did you work full-time or part-time?
When we moved to the beach, I went part-time.
Okay.
So that meant I was going to be gone 2 nights a week. So whenever John passed, I was like, what am I going to do about having, somebody to watch my kids? I thought, well, I'll have my mom come and watch the kids. And the hospital that I had gotten a job with, after a couple weeks, they were calling me and saying, are you ready to come back to work?
Yeah.
And I thought, I can't imagine looking after somebody else for a 12-hour shift while somebody stays with my kids. John and I were very much a team, and in that we worked opposite of each other. So my kids had never been with anybody else.
Same.
John stayed with them at night. I was with him during the day because he taught school and was a preacher. So he was always home at night. So one thing that I didn't even realize until I was at the funeral home was that my kids could get his Social Security benefits. I knew that if you were an older lady and your husband passed away, you got his Social Security. But I was thinking, I'm going to have to go back to work full time. What do I do? And so the funeral home director gave me the number to call, and I had to give all of their birth dates, their information, and he said, we'll look at what John has worked, and I'll call you back with a number of what you'll get every month to look after your children. So I was trying to think about it. It maybe was a week before I heard back, and oddly enough, I was driving in the rain to go handle some stuff that we needed done, and I got a call from the Social Security office, and he said, you're going to get this amount every month and until your children are 18. And the amount that he gave me was $200 more than what I made as a full-time nurse a month. And
That's a blessing.
I just cried in the car because now I'm fortunate that I won't have to go back to work full-time until all my children are 18.
Yeah.
But I had no idea that even existed.
Yeah.
I didn't know that they were eligible for that or that.
I think it was you that told me that about Hudson. So we're in that process now, and it's like it's a long process. I think during COVID maybe they were expediting that, but now it's like a 200-day process. So we're in that process right now of getting that for Hudson. Obviously Morgan's an adult, but I agree with you on the team. Mike and I had a very good division of responsibilities. I worked. He came in the morning, trained clients, worked out, was home by 8:30. I left for work, took Hudson to school, came to work. He got Hudson off the bus almost every day, kept her till I got home.
Yeah.
Hudson had never been in like daycare or, I mean, we have babysitters, but yeah, so I had, again, that was another like, what am I going to do about my job?
Right.
I mean, she's 7, so there are days that I brought her, I had babysitters, but that's still a process for me. Like, it's still like, I'm having a moment, like, what am I going to do with her after school? I'm going to have to pay someone, or she's going to have to go to some kind of care at least 2 days a week because I'm here in the evening. So, but I am in that process of that, the Social Security. As far as like knowing where everything was, like how organized was John? So when you realize we have rental properties, like when I realized Mike had, like purchased like a gun or was selling someone, or somebody was modding something out for him, or he had purchased. There was a lot of people coming in and out, a lot of things that I had to figure out.
Yeah.
Did you guys, is he organized? Is what I'm asking.
No, I can answer that in one word, no. John had a home office, and the door was always shut. I never went in there. It was a disaster area. So I remember like 2 days after he passed, I opened that door, and I walked in. He had 4 filing cabinets, full of stuff. He paid our bills. We had a joint account, and so he paid all of our bills. I knew basically what bills we had, but I started going through the filing cabinets, and John was an art teacher, so everything had all different color Post-it notes on it. Like, I was like, what do these Post-it notes mean? But there would be no handwriting on the Post-it notes. He had, like, in his mind, these were color-coded for whatever it was. So trying to decipher his method was difficult. So what I did is I just got a notebook out, and I wrote down house payment, power bill, all of the phone bill, all the bills that I knew that we had, and just started trying to figure out. Now, you made a notebook.
Well, like I said, I had some good friends. One that's a financial planner that helped me move his, because we did pay into his 401k at his work. Like, call me, and I have another girl that was a client of mine that does life insurance, and she literally came and said, "We have to do this." So I did the same. Mike's office was kind of like his just dumping ground, and with his job, he was so detail oriented, but like, all of our bills pretty much came out of our joint account. There was no method to the madness, we just did it. But yeah, I had to go back and find like tax information, and, like, just to make a joke, like, he had a filing cabinet. We had 4 of them too, but one of them was just important stuff. That's what it was labeled. And I couldn't find our birth certificates, our socials. Like, I kind of relied on him to store that. I mean, I found it in an envelope that just said, "Don't throw away." Like, I'm opening it up, and it's like, oh, it's our original birth certificates, our actual marriage license. But to get all, like, the Social Security and all the stuff you need, you have to, like, for me, like that, I have 2 ones. And it's just important documents. And so if something happens, it's labeled. And my kids make fun of me because they're like, "Mom, it's way too much." But it's,
It's not, because I didn't have a notebook like that at all.
We didn't either.
So after John passed away, I have a notebook that has basically, this is how we run our home.
I actually have a whole detailed list. Yeah, you have to now.
My sister and my oldest daughter, who's an adult, know where that notebook is. And they know, basically, this is what has to happen first for our lives to keep running smooth. I think one of the worst times for me was I got a phone call saying that our property tax hadn't been paid, and that if I didn't pay it by this certain date, our property would be auctioned off.
Yeah.
And I was like, I didn't even know that, so I think for any family to have a notebook like that, it can really take a lot of the stress off from having to, because you are in such a fog that you don't want to have to make those kind of decisions.
No, I agree, because, like I said, other than knowing his wishes, and it's so funny, like his HR director from his job will say, like, I told him to sign the life insurance and the will, and I would send it, but he just would never finish it. Mike loved to help everybody, so he was constantly being pulled in other directions. And he was ultimately like a stay-at-home dad. I mean, all summer he kept Hudson. So like, even for my kids, it's like they were with him as much, if not more, than me, because I was busy trying to build a business and a life. Yeah. And so when I look back, I'm like, wow, he was a really great dad. And that's kind of where I'm feeling like my biggest failure is like being a mom, being present. At what point, and I know people are always asking, what do you need? What do you need? And really, for me, I would say like the DoorDash gift cards, dropping stuff off was fine. I didn't really want a lot of people at my house. I didn't want to talk on the phone. I don't want you yelling, at me through the gym. I didn't want hugs. I'm not a hugger. But was there something that you felt like this would have been? I mean, obviously, if Mike would have been organized, it would have been super helpful. But, I knew he wasn't, but like that. But was there something that you actually did need that you're like, what, this is what, looking back, because I'm still in it. And I'm only at 4 months, so I am still in that like fight or flight mode. Like every morning I get them going, you got to get this done. Yeah. And that's why I thought this was so important, because you need to have a will and a trust for your children. You need to have life insurance. You need to have it in writing what you want to be done with your body, or, if you're anything that you have that is valuable to you. And Mike had some stuff that was, and what do you want me to do with it? Because as I just, like, some of it I didn't know. The service was easy, and you were at the service. We did a celebration of life. We had over 300 people. It was beautiful. Again, I was in a fog for most of that. But I would say up until for the first 2 months, I feel like I didn't sleep, didn't eat, didn't breathe. It was just get shit done, Amanda.
I think one of the things that helped me the most was, my kids were watching all of this go on, and John was very involved with them too, and he took them places all the time. And again, we had just moved here, and there was so much to do. And here at the beach, he was taking them to the museums and the aquariums. Yes. And it had probably been a couple weeks after he'd passed, and a girlfriend of mine called and said, can I come pick up the girls? We're going to go ice skating. And I was like, oh, well, sure, that would be fantastic. Then I can get some more of this stuff done. Mike came and got Oliver.
I remember.
We have one son, and Mike came and got him several times to take him to lunch, because that's part for me that I feel where I fall a little short. I'm a good mom, but I'm not going to fill his dad's shoes.
I agree.
And so it was awesome to have men that Oliver knew his dad respected, that would become involved with him. So Mike would come and get him for lunch. John's best friend, they came and got Oliver for a couple of weekends, and he stayed with them. And it was great to see Oliver hear good things about his dad from people who had grown up with him that were buddies of his. John had 4 fraternity brothers that were in a group chat, and they included Oliver in the group chat. And they said, we're not taking your dad's name out. You're going to be in the group chat.
Add you, yeah.
So that's the kind of non-monetary things that really helped me, was having people come in and do things with my kids, because I couldn't see. I'm like you. I have my list. I've got to do these 3 things today, and come hell or high water, these 3 have got to be done today. Yeah. And my kids were just sitting there.
Yep, that's how it was too. And I like you, I'm like, and some days I'll be honest, it's like, if I can just make it until 5 o'clock, I'll be okay. Like, I felt like so many times, I can't do this. Can't do this. Like, Mike was that dad, did the same thing. I mean, they had season passes for the aquarium. He took her to, shopping, Stars and Strikes. I mean, I have to work, and I'm trying to do all of these things.
Yeah.
But the kids, they don't understand that. They're like, I'm sitting home, I'm bored, and that's where I would say the same. So that I did have people that came over and said, let me take Hudson, and Morgan, get out, you're coming with us, and that was really helpful. I mean, I had people give us money. That was helpful. I mean, it was. I'm not going to lie. At the time, we needed it because it was like our finances were on a complete pause.
Right.
And I didn't know where. I mean, like I said, I didn't sit down and look, but that was something I definitely needed, was someone to just either be there to do the little dumb things around the house, or to help with the Hudson, and Morgan. I know she's an adult, but she's still, my kid, and her and Mike were close. They did a lot of things too. So
they did.
That's tough.
You said something about your finances that made me think. I did not know, like my name was not on John's business bank account. So he was having all these jobs done. People were messaging me saying, I put a new air conditioner in this home and this was the bill for it.
Yeah.
And so I had to go to the bank with John's official death certificate.
Yep.
I will say this, when you get a death certificate, you need at least 15 copies of it, because
15, yep.
I'm almost 4 years out and I still have to show that death certificate often. I thought, I'll show it a couple of times and then I'll be able to do business.
Yes, nope.
But I had to show that death certificate. I had to open an estate here in South Carolina so that I could be John's personal representative, because his business was not in our names. So to be able to do business as John, I had to have a certified copy that I was his personal representative. And so that's some of the first things that I had to take care of. I went to the bank. I went to the courthouse to get those documents.
Yeah.
And that's the kind of stuff that I had to do right then. And even still, like, I'm still writing out bills for his business as John Bird's personal representative.
Yeah.
And I had no idea how to do that. And so I think it'll be good if we can at some point have a financial planner.
That's the plan, is to have a financial planner, or life insurance rep, and just an attorney. Having an attorney, so you know what to have. I remember the one weekend. I think it was Memorial Day maybe or something. And sometimes it gets like crazy down here. And I said to my attorney, I need my will and trust. I need all this done. And in the meantime, our vehicles are in Mike's name, so I had to go probate court and do. I mean, it's a whole process too. And we can get into that when the attorney comes. I'll have her discuss more about that. But having things in writing, you got to do it. I mean, like, this conversation, it doesn't work for his bank account, our cars, even though the payment comes out of our joint checking account. The title now is in Mike's name, so now I'm in the process of having to get that switched. It's a whole thing, and yes, you have to have a lot of death certificates, because you're going to have to, sometimes most places are taking them. You're like, here you go. I need this for my records. So get a lot, for sure.
One thing that I had happen that I was totally unprepared for, after John had passed for maybe a year, I started thinking I need to move from here. We had bought a condo, and I wanted to move to a house because we were living between North Carolina and South Carolina. And so whenever I bought my new house, that was a whole new realm of doing something on my own, because I'd never bought anything by myself before. But I bought our house, and I went to change my address on my driver's license. And when I got there, they needed, and I needed a South Carolina driver's license. They asked me for my birth certificate. They asked me for bills from the new house where we were, and they asked me for my marriage certificate.
Yeah.
And I was like, oh, I don't even know where that is.
Yeah.
So I went back home, got my marriage certificate, brought it back.
Which is a whole pain in the butt,
yes,
too. Yeah.
And they said, this marriage certificate doesn't look real. And I was like, what do you mean it doesn't look real?
Yeah.
I said, it's the only one I ever got.
Yeah.
And I don't know if it was because it was so far back,
Yeah.
It didn't look like what people
Didn't
get
look
now.
official. Yeah.
But yeah, they said it didn't look official. And you think about the things that you say, and I was like, I just need my driver's license.
And that, I agree.
I've been this name for the last 29 years.
Yeah.
I need my driver's license.
Yeah.
And they said, well, we can't do it for you. And I look back at some times that I said things I shouldn't have said to people
100%,
who probably were just doing their job.
Yeah.
But,
Oh, yeah, for sure.
and I'm sure at some point in time we'll get into the things that you say and things that people say to you that people should never say.
For sure.
And you're not prepared for the things that people say. But that was just a whole. And I saw in your book you had your marriage certificate, and that's what made me think of that
I had
story.
to call the city we were and get it, though, because I'm sure Mike has it somewhere, but, I just I need to have it. So, yes, I do. I have all of that. Our driver's license copies, our social copies. I have a couple of death certificates in here. I have one book that goes in our safe, and another one is in Mike's office, well, now my office, but... and the kids know where everything is, and my mom and sister know where, so, yeah. You touched on this in the beginning, and I'm just curious. What about, did this experience, and again, I'm 4 months in, you're 3 years, so we're at different places, but did this draw you closer to God? Because I know you have a relationship with God, or further away? And
I think it's the only thing that I could cling to. I mean... My family's been in church since I was a baby. It's all I know. But, the 40 days that John was sick, I got up and read my Bible and prayed. And looking back on it, because I am 3.5 years out, I remember my prayers were, please bring him home. Please make him well. I can't do this by myself. I don't want to do this by myself.
Yeah.
And... I think over and over again, that whole 40 days, I kept seeing this one scripture come up. And I'll read it to you. It's Isaiah 41:10. 41:10. Do not fear, for I'm with you. Do not be dismayed, for I am your God. I will strengthen you and help you. I will uphold you with my righteous right hand. And I think that verse kept coming up, and I was like, okay, well, he's promising me I'm not going to have to do this by myself. But at the same time, I just was so certain that John was going to come home.
I agree. I was with you during, I think, the majority of that.
Yeah, I was certain he was going to get better.
Same. Mike and I both said the same thing.
Yeah. So, and then, afterwards, I kept thinking God would not put me in a place and not prepare me for it. And when I look back, like I said, 40 days in the Bible is very significant. And so I thought, oh, this 40th day, he's going to bring John home. He's going to make him well. And looking back at it, God knew John's last day. I didn't know John's last day, but God knew what it was. So now I know the 40 days was for me. The 40 days was for me to prepare.
That's powerful. Actually, that's a powerful statement.
It was for me to get used to, you can do this by yourself. It's not ideal. It's not what you want. It's not the way that I thought that John would be healed, but I know he's healed. And I know the last few days that I prayed, because he wasn't getting better, I prayed, do what is best for John. And whatever that means, help me to handle it, whatever it is. And I feel like that he's doing that, just like with me finding out that I could get John's Social Security. He's providing for me, even though this isn't what I wanted. He's been with me every step of the way. But I will say that it doesn't happen that way for everyone. I'll give my son as an example, and at some point in time, he may or may not want to talk, about this, but Oliver had a very hard time with God after this. He was angry, and there is a lot of, I will be honest, there's been a lot of anger for me, but Oliver was angry, and he didn't want to go to church anymore. He didn't want to. I could see him. We would always pray before we ate or whatever. And he'd sit and have his eyes open, and he just had this look on his face. That he was so disappointed and he was so angry. And I just told him one day, Oliver, you're 16. I have the benefit of having been alive for 32 years longer than you. And even though this did not turn out the way that I wanted, I've seen God prove himself to me time and time again for 48 years. I said, so I'm not going to question him now. I have questions.
Yeah.
And I'm sure one day I'll get to ask those. But at the same time, I told Oliver, I said, I'm not going to turn my back on God because he's answered me too many times. And, it's been 3 years now, and just now Oliver is starting to pray again. He's starting to go to a Bible study with college kids his own age, and I'm thankful for that. But we still go to church. I'm not involved like I was before. I'm not on committees. I don't do a lot, but I'm there because it's just hard enough for me to go
and that's
by
a huge
myself.
step. Just I'm there. Yeah, we totally. I can totally understand that. And that's my kids are. They're both angry. And I'll be honest. A lot of days I am. I mean, a lot of times we make a joke back and forth. Like I'll have to do something, and I'll be like, "Damn it, Mike," or like a lot of. I mean, there are a lot of days. Again, I'm at 4 months, so I'm like, I'm not back in church. I'll be totally honest. I'm not there yet. I don't know. I know God has a plan and a purpose, and I believe in God. And I grew up in church. Mike and I were very involved in our church in Ohio. We've gone to church down here. I think I took you in Mike's office, and on the wall he has scriptures just. And where it says you, he put his name in, like,
right.
Mike, you are a mighty man of God. Like, so I know his faith was strong, and I know when he passed it was quickly, but my kids are both angry, do not want to go to church right now, but there are days where, actually for the first time last week, we watched Pastor Stephen Furtek, we live streamed his, and both of my kids sang the songs and sat for the entire service, and I did too, and that was the first time that we'd really, kind of yielded, I guess, to God. But that's been a struggle for me. Like I am mad. Like I don't want to do this by myself. Mike and I had like a good partnership. Did we go through hard times? Yes. Did we struggle? Yes. Did we have great times? Yes. But we were always working towards the same goal, which was us getting our kids out and living in a little house on the beach where that's like that was our goal. And so for me, picturing my future, and again, I'm at 4 months, so you're a little different, but I can't. And I'm at the place where I'm like, I don't even want to.
Right.
Like, I don't want to. Like, people are talking about, like, I don't give a shit. I don't want to do that. Because it's hard for me to see myself without Mike.
Yeah.
Like, it was Mike and Amanda. And just like, we laugh, but it was, John Bird, because we knew other John. So, John Bird, it was, I would never think of inviting you without him. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So, it's just, I'm not there yet, but.
That's how we had planned to move to the beach.
Get 'em out.
and work part-time. We were both going to work part-time, and we said we don't want to be old moving to the beach. We want to move to the beach and
When you can enjoy
have
it,
fun.
Yes.
And, we move here, and the beach is shut down. Everything's closed because of COVID.
Yeah.
And then he passes away. And I'm like, I'm supposed to go out on the beach with my kids without him. Yeah. And it's
I don't even know. We haven't even done that. I don't even know how to do that.
Yeah. it's a very odd place to be, where you recognize the area around you is beautiful and it's supposed to be a happy place, and you have this heavy in your chest. It's like this is great, but this isn't what
And there's always that but.
Yeah.
Yep.
This is great, but I actually was able last summer. I have 4 girlfriends that we take a girls trip every year, and they wanted to bring their husbands, and we went on a cruise. And they were like, they all invited me to stay in their room. Like, you can stay in our room. And I was like, no, I'll be fine. I'll get a room by myself. It's the first time that I went on a trip without John.
Yeah.
And it was, I was proud of myself.
Yeah, good for you.
But at the same time, there was this like,
It's a heaviness.
it's heavy.
Yeah.
I would, all of my friends had their husbands with them, and they were great to me. Their husbands were like, we joked that everybody was taking a turn, waiting on me and bringing me food and drinks. But then I'd go back to my room by myself.
Yeah.
And to be in a room full of people and still feel like you're alone is hard to explain. And I think, it's been 3.5 years. I'm hoping with time that gets a little easier, but it's still difficult. Yeah.
I'm gonna go back a little bit too. Right after, what did you use like those first couple months to cope? Because I know I've done some healthy things and some really unhealthy things.
I would say the same thing. Well, you and I have both always been into fitness,
Yes.
and funny enough, how we met was John had signed he and I up for your boxing class.
That's so funny. I just remember us meeting for boxing.
So 5 years ago, John tells me, "Oh, I signed us up for boxing. We're going to start boxing."
I don't even remember him. I only remember you.
Yeah,
That's
I was
hilarious.
like, because he went one time.
Yes.
And I loved it. I ended up being the one that loved it. But so we've always been like in fitness and trying to work out and nutrition, and that's a big part of both of our lives. So for me, whenever John passed away, we did live on the beach. I would get up in the morning, probably about 6:30, and I would walk 5 miles on the beach. And it would take me about an hour and a half, but I knew my kids were still asleep. I wasn't taking time away from them. And I would go out on the beach, and that was my time to process what has happened and to sort of prepare for my day and figure out what I needed to get done that day. And I'll be honest, I would stand in the edge of the water and say, God, why?
Yeah.
Why am I doing? Why did it turn out this way?
Yeah.
And that because I'm a very private person, I do not like to cry in front of people. I
don't either.
I don't. If I cry, shit has hit the fan.
Yeah. I would say right after John, because I was with you, I feel like a lot, even though it was COVID. And I would say to my husband, I'd be like, Kendra's a freaking tank. I mean, you were just I felt like you had just everything handled.
Well, I
Yes.
didn't.
Well, that's good to know, because that's how I am right now.
But for me, and I want to dispel this myth that was in my mind. I thought if my children saw me cry,
Yes.
they would say, "Oh, it's all gone to hell."
Yeah.
Dad's not here.
Yeah.
Mom's a wreck.
Yeah.
And so I would not cry in front of my children. And so for me, I used that time when I walked on the beach, I would sob. And I would get close back to my home, and I'd be like, all right, dry it up. It's time to cut it.
Get it together.
Time to cut it up,
Yep.
cut it off. You have to go inside. And finally, what made me realize that I was wrong was I did get a counselor. I thought, I've got to have some help.
Yeah.
I've got to have somebody that I can talk to
Yes.
about this.
And that'll help you help you navigate it. 'Cause
Yeah.
Like a friend that hasn't been through it can't do
Right.
it. And that's what I beat myself up for.
So the first thing that I tried was a grief share. It was a group that was through my church, and it was like a 6-week long course where you do a workbook and you watch videos. So I went to that, and I literally was the only person who was in their 40s. Everybody else was 70 plus,
Yes.
and their spouse might have died, and they were sobbing, and I felt like there was not a soul in that room that knew
Could relate to you.
what was happening, that knew what was going on. So I went 3 times, and I was like, screw this, I'm not going anymore because I feel worse when I leave here than when I get here. I'm not saying that's not a great program or that it doesn't work for some people, but for me, because of the fact that I'm not comfortable showing my emotions in public, it wasn't for me.
Yeah.
So I went the route of, I have a counselor that we have never seen each other face to face. We speak on the phone, and we would speak on the phone an hour every week.
Yeah.
And
Still do that.
he was, I guess for me, he was a grief counselor, but he was also a life coach. Like, we talked about my grief, but as time went on, he said, okay, what do you want your life to be like?
Yeah.
What are we going to do next? You know, and his name's John Polo. He's fantastic. His wife actually passed when they were 30, 31. And so I respected him because I felt like he knew what he was talking about.
Yeah.
And that he could talk to me from a perspective of, I've done this, you know, you can do this. This is what you might see. So he would kind of let me know, like, when things were coming up that might be hard for me. For me, like, he mentioned Christmas. He mentioned, you know, birthdays, anniversaries. And some of that's going to be very hard for a lot of people. That is not what's hard for me. What is hard for me are the days that I'm not counting on. I think the first one that I noticed was when my kids went to prom, and Oliver had to have a tie, and I didn't know how to tie a tie.
Yeah.
And I was like, shit. I don't know
You're
how
like,
to.
damn it, John Bird.
I was like, yeah, we laugh and we say, damn, John Bird, where are you at?
Yes.
You know,
I don't know how to tie a tie either.
my brother-in-law tied it for him.
Yeah.
And so I've had wonderful people come in and help me out.
Yeah.
But I would say, as far as coping, the walking and every morning and getting counseling, and I will be 100% honest, I've never been a big drinker. I'm not a...
No, I've known you for 5 years.
But when I knew that people were going to be in my house, when I knew I had to do something really tough, I honestly would take a shot of vodka.
Yeah.
Because I thought I
Just
have to
relieves
take
that
I
edge.
have to take the edge off of this.
Mm-hmm.
And truthfully, you know, after a few months, I didn't have to do that anymore because it didn't benefit me.
Yeah.
It wasn't healthy for me. The things that helped me more were walking, talking to somebody that knew what they were talking about, that could guide me, and count on the people that I knew I could count on.
Mm-hmm. That's good. That's good too.
Yeah. So what, I know you're fresh into it. What has
I feel like the first 2 months I
happened
was
for you?
on autopilot. I couldn't tell you what I did. I didn't really do anything. I just functioned. About month 3, which was last month. Now I have been in counseling. My 3rd or 4th phone call was our counselor, Mike, and I were both. He was in therapy. I was in therapy since my father passed away, and we did marriage therapy like once a month. So I was in contact with her. So I did do therapy. I have not worked out. I haven't done any of that. But for me, I did. I would say, like, last month, my oldest daughter was like, you're drinking pretty much every night before you go to bed. And I realized it. And so since then, I just said, okay, I'm not going to do that. But it was like the anxiety about sleeping, the anxiety about the next day. And so about 5 or 6 o'clock, especially when I knew, you know, I had shit to do, I'd be like, for me, it's Fireball. So I'd be like, a shot of Fireball. And 1 turned into 2, turned into 4. So I'm not going to lie. I drank. And my kids, you know, saw me, and I'm sure it was unhealthy, but I'm not in a place where I'm like, you know, that's where I'm at. So I'm going to be honest. Now, since my birthday, which was July 10th, so it's been, I don't know, I'm over a month. I haven't drank because that's when my daughter's the day after I was hungover. So I knew I drank too much, but she's like, no, you're drinking more than I've ever, like, and me too. I'm not a huge drinker. I'll go out, but so that was something that that I was doing. But I also am still in therapy. The kids are still in therapy weekly. That has helped. Both of my kids still are in that angry phase, where I'm in the phase where, everyone's like, "You're so strong," and I'm like, "What? No, I'm not.
You're just doing things that
I
have to
just
be
got to
done.
get shit done. Like, I'm not
Yeah.
strong at all. Like, I may appear that way, but you don't see me at home
Yeah.
when I'm drinking to go to sleep, or when you don't see me when I'm on my knees in the shower sobbing. So I'm not that strong. I will say this, and I know this is going to be controversial, but because of how Mike passed, it was so sudden. Like, I really didn't know. Cardiac arrest could be anything. I mean, I don't know, and we didn't do an autopsy, so I sought out through a mutual friend, like a medium, and she was like a spiritual medium, and she said, this is faith-based. I'm a Christian, all those things. So I did do that, and I know that a lot of people, especially, people that are, grew up in church, like we both did, see that as, that's terrible. You shouldn't do that. But for me, and I've shared some of that with you, that's what gave me comfort.
Gave you comfort.
That is one of the biggest things that gave me, like, okay, I knew he died peacefully, at least for me. And I know, again, that's not what people are going to do, but that's what I did. So
I think that's something that one of my friends, it was a huge gift for her to give me, is to tell me that that's okay. If it helped you, if it brought you
and
comfort.
you did tell me that, and I said, I'm
Yeah.
sorry, I'm going to say this, and you said, if that helped you,
Yeah.
you were like, no judgment.
There's no judgment. I mean, if that's what helps you, and I think that's one thing I've learned through this whole process is I am so much less judgmental for how other people handle things, because if you don't know, you don't know what you would do. You have no idea. Is this how I would handle it? Because you don't. And there's not a wrong way to do this, I don't think, unless you're doing something self-destructive.
Yeah.
But my girlfriend that had gone through this, she told me, she said, you have license to be a jackass for a year. She said, nobody can say anything to you or hold you responsible for a year at least, because you don't, stuff still comes up. And the grief is not linear. It's like you're not angry for 3 months and then you're, accepting for 3 months. It doesn't work that way.
No, I'm still pissed.
And I was pissed last week.
Yeah, I know.
And it's been almost 4 years for me. I'm accepting of it, but it doesn't mean that I'm not mad,
I like that you said about giving grace, because I see it too. Like, I see now, I wish things I would have done differently for you when you were going through this, but I didn't know. So I think just kind of now knowing, and essentially that's what we're going to be doing with this podcast, is just giving you the information that helped us. I'm not telling you to go get drunk. I'm not telling you to go take a walk on the beach. I'm not telling you to come in here and hit a heavy bag for an hour. But that's what helped me. But we're going to answer a lot more questions. You guys have asked great questions, and it's been, this has been therapy for me. I don't know about you.
It has,
and I'm hoping that this will help other people. But that's going to be our episode for today. But we're going to keep these coming, so please keep bringing the questions. And I just want to thank you all for your kindness and graciousness to me. And we'll see you guys next time.
Thank you.